Coming to you tonight from Aldrich Park, an island of green in the center of the University of California, Irvine, I'm George Strait, and this is State of Minds. UC Irvine is in Orange County, about halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles, and just a few miles east of the Pacific Ocean. What began as ranchland some 40 years ago, this campus is now the intellectual and cultural hub of the OC. And like the 9 other campuses of the UC system, UC Irvine celebrates California as a state of minds. Tonight we'll meet UC Berkeley engineers who've been charged with road testing the latest fuel cell car from Daimler-Chrysler. Also, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, UC Davis geologists warn that California's Central Valley is at risk for what could be a Gulf-like disaster. And finally, a UC San Diego physicist goes nutty to teach nano to a national television audience. But first we'll begin with a project here at UC Irvine, where researchers are building an in-flight gymnasium for astronauts. Here's Joe Camoriano.
We all know that exercise is essential for good health, whether we work out to achieve that perfect body or simply to keep the one that we have. The important thing is that we get off the couch and do something. But what if you were an astronaut stuck in a space capsule for several months? It's not like you can walk around the block every morning. So how do they stay in shape? And why is it so vital for them to exercise in space?
According to Dr. Ken Baldwin, professor of physiology and biophysics at UC Irvine, when an astronaut goes into space for long periods of time, their bones and muscles begin to deteriorate because of the lack of gravity.
The muscle system begins to lose its size, its protein mass, and its strength. And when an individual comes back after spending many days or many months in space, the individuals are weak, they lose their motor skills, they can hardly walk, and obviously they lose their strength, and they're really susceptible to a number of other problems because of this lack of gravity being continually influencing their body.
To help alleviate the problem of bone and muscle loss in space, a team of scientists at UC Irvine have developed a workout machine that makes its own gravity. It's called the Space Cycle and works much like a merry-go-round.
It starts out with both centrifuge arms are simply in a vertical position, and as the bike begins to spin and we begin to create a horizontal force, the arms of the centrifuge begin to splay out, if you will, or begin to rotate out towards the horizontal plane. The degree to which the arms move outward is really dependent upon the G's that we're producing on the bike. So when we go ahead and demonstrate this, we'll be up around 2 to 3 G's, and the arms will be out somewhere between 60 to 70 degrees. The neat thing about this that's difficult to appreciate is that in doing this, the net gravitational vector is always going through the midline of the body. And so the individual who's riding, even though they're out literally in this type of position, there's no sensation of falling. They believe that they're in a perfectly upright position. So it makes the ride very comfortable. There's no sensation you're going to fall out of this device. There's no sensation that your body is sideways in the air. For all intents and purposes, you think you're standing up.
So why do the scientists think that this form of exercise, performed in space, may actually work better for astronauts than a workout here on Earth?
By using daily exposures of the G cycle on the individuals that are in space, we can recreate a gravity stimulus or a hypergravity stimulus for varying durations. And we think that this prescription of gravity will help to influence the homeostasis of the muscle, the homeostasis of bone, which is also sensitive to gravity, as well as provide stimuli that would help in motor skills, as well as the operational capabilities of the cardiovascular system as well.
Dr. Joyce Kiak, Associate Professor in Residence at UC Irvine's Department of Orthopedic Surgery, will be analyzing data from the astronauts.
In this study, we're going to calculate the subject's hip strength before they go on the space cycle and before they perform their exercise, and then we'll be evaluating them after they're on the space cycle. So we'll be able to see the change in bone strength that occurs, if there is a change. He's placing the cup on top of the head of the femur, and what that does is it distributes the force across the spherical part of the bone, so it doesn't crush just in one point.
So this is acting like the hip?
This acts like the joint of the hip. Now, the foam bone didn't actually break in the place where a normal femur would usually break. Typically, when a person fractures their hip, the fracture occurs in the neck or in the greater trochanter, which is in this area, or just slightly below. So when someone has a hip fracture, it's this area of the bone that breaks.
And that's what astronauts would experience when they get back.
And that's what an astronaut could potentially break if he went to Mars, came back, and then landed on Earth, and now all of a sudden he's functioning at full Earth gravity.
Dr. Kiak and her team have created computer models that show bone densities of astronauts. They'll use this research to help determine if the space cycle was successful. Dr. Kiak is also hopeful that the cycle will help with other research not associated with space.
Well, another application of this of the space cycle is actually to study the process of osteoporosis and how maybe we can reverse it.
Besides the possible health benefits gained from the space cycle, those who've ridden it say it's just plain fun.
That was a good workout. That was a lot of fun.
The team of scientists from UC Irvine hopes to find some positive effects of the space cycle soon. Their next workout, so to speak, would be to acquire the funding necessary to put the cycle in space. Reporting for UC Irvine, I'm Joe Camoriano.
I'm now in the Arts Plaza at UC Irvine, a public gathering space designed by Maya Lin, the world-famous artist who's probably best known for her design of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. At the center of the plaza is the water table, surrounded by what Maya Lin calls whispering benches. Together they offer staff, faculty, students, and even visitors a quiet place to pause and reflect. The water in this fountain is contained in a piece of art. Water not contained can cause havoc, as we saw on the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina. We go now to UC Davis, where geologists warn that something similar could happen to California's Central Valley. Paul Fontenauer explains.
As the world watched floodwaters devastate New Orleans last year, a measure that would have helped protect California's levees from failing was dying in Sacramento at the Capitol. Water experts say a large earthquake or flood could ruin the 1,100-mile network of levees that crisscross the California Delta. Those levees hold back floodwaters from Red Bluff to Fresno, protecting homes, farms, and businesses. The Delta supplies drinking water for 2/3 of the state's population and irrigation water for more than 7 million acres in the Central Valley. But Jeff Mound, a UC Davis geology professor and watershed expert, says the odds are 2 in 3 that a catastrophe will strike the Delta in the next 50 years.
The economic impact to California will be huge. A large flooding event, roughly $40 billion, and that's just in the first few years, and then uncounted costs in the future. So substantial disruption in water supply, along with transportation, recreation, flooding of homes. It's a big mess if the Delta floods.
For example, last year a single levee failure at the Jones Tract west of Stockton flooded 12,000 acres of Delta farmland. The cost? $100 million for repairs and losses. Mount points out that levees are designed to control floods by channeling the flow of water He says that's not a good idea.
There isn't a flood control expert that I know of in the valley who will tell you that this system is adequate. The problem is you try to stuff too much water down the pipe, which is the problem with these close levees, especially during very, very large, rare storms, and they fail.
These levees were originally built to dry out land for crops. They were often constructed by farmers, not engineers, and in some cases by Chinese laborers more than 100 years ago. They are nothing more than earthen embankments.
The issue that we see in New Orleans, which was too much water, too fast, and overwhelming the levees, is exactly the same kind of problem here in the Sacramento region. Too much water, too fast.
Are you saying that levees are a bad idea?
Levees are our only choice at this point to protect these urban areas. So we're in a constant battle with the river. I mean, literally working against the river all the time with these levees.
Mount says levees need to be designed better. After all, they are the principal lines of defense against floods for thousands of people whose homes are built right up against these levees. Homeowner Sonia Lopez, whose home is less than a quarter mile from the Sacramento River, says she's concerned.
If the engineers are the ones that are uncertain, or is it somebody else, and is it the politicians who are assuring us that it is, or is it the engineers? Because I hear two conflicting stories, I don't know who to believe and I don't know what to believe.
One alternative is to store the excess water on floodplains.
And so you're able to route water and store water on a floodplain during the very, very high flow events. And the best design, in fact, people from around the world come to look at it, is in our own backyard, and that's the Yellow Bypass. The Yellow Bypass serves as probably the single most effective flood control method we have in the Central Valley.
So you can never overflow this bypass?
Yes, you can. That's one of the big scary things, is that the bypass itself, as we change operations upstream, now we continue to harden and strengthen the levees upstream, and associated with increased urbanization upstream, we start to funnel more water into this, because it has to go in here. Because if it goes into the Sacramento River, those levees fail and you flood Natomas in the city of Sacramento or West Sacramento. So we're stressing the Yolo Bypass now about to the max.
The Sacramento Valley Delta is one of the fastest growing regions in the state, and the bulk of the growth is occurring on floodplains like this one. Mount says we're creating our own New Orleans.
And the alternative is perhaps the most politically unpalatable, and that is not to place homes in the shadow of levees. To start at the beginning with good land use planning practices. That's number one.
During the recent heavy rains, the levee system was tested. But how strong was that test?
It was a modest flood, a vanilla flood. The interesting thing that happened is that most of the islands in the Delta had incidents where they had to do flood fights on the island. They had boils, they had water coming over the top of the levees, they had erosion of the levees. It was pretty significant. And what was a bit surprising is that this vanilla flood caused some considerable anxiety in the Delta, which raises the obvious question, what do you do when a real flood comes to the Delta?
Over time, the levees have deteriorated, weakened by erosion, seepage, animal burrows. Add to that something called subsidence, the gradual sinking of the land behind the levees from oxidation of the peat soil and compaction by farming. Many Delta islands are now 25 feet below sea level. Recently, state water experts were worried that Twitchell Island, a critical cog in the Central Valley water system, would collapse, flooding the island with billions of gallons of salt water from the San Francisco Bay.
From a water supply perspective, under the present system, obviously saltwater intrusions regarded as a disaster. From a fish perspective, if it's done right, it could be good.
Peter Moyle's passion for fish has swept him into the vortex of water politics. Considered California's native fish expert, Moyle says losing some of the Delta islands to flooding may be good not only for fishes, but also native plants.
You can create the kind of habitat that used to be in great abundance in the estuary, which is now gone. That is habitat that's free of these invading clams and free of the invading plant species that have changed the system so much. Habitat where you've recreated a lot of the pelagic ecosystem that supports the species that seem to be in the most trouble in the system right now.
Trying to find the right solutions for all the competing needs of this monumental problem is a challenge California is facing. Developing a plan of action before a crisis occurs is a responsibility legislators often fail to meet. Organizational sociologist Tom Beamish, who studies how institutions deal with disasters, says government agencies are generally reactive.
Politicians are looking for issues that pay off, and planning for something that has yet to occur or that may or may not occur is not as big a payoff as planning for something that is salient to folks and that folks are worried about in the moment. Crime, new roads, cutting budget deficits that are there. These things are salient images in the now. We don't typically in our day-to-day either want to or do we worry about the sky falling.
The State Department of Water Resources, in its last annual report, called California's flood control system a ticking time bomb. All eyes are looking to Sacramento and the California legislature to see what action the state will take. Reporting from Davis, I'm Paul Fotenauer.
I'm standing outside of the Brent Event Center here at UC Irvine with a good buddy of mine, Liz Toomey, who's head of government affairs.
Yes, government and community relations here at UC Irvine.
So how long have you been on campus?
Been here 19 years, George. Can't believe it.
So you know everything about this? Where did this anteater come from?
This anteater. Our students would not like that. Anyway, this is Peter the Anteater, and he's our mascot. And he's been our mascot since we were founded in 1965.
How did you happen upon a mascot?
How we happened upon this is a wonderful story. 1965 was a time when kids were reverent as well as irreverent. And Peter,
like we used to be.
Like we used to be. And Peter came out of the irreverence part. They wanted to have a part of the bear family because we are from the bear family. And they came upon Peter. And how they came upon Peter is, do you remember the cartoonist Johnny Hart?
Sure.
And his BC, his comic strip BC? Here we go.
So this is part of the bear? This is a bear?
This is a bear, and they love ants and grubs and all the kinds of things that bears like to do. So this is part of the bear family. So we can stand up beside a Bruin or a cow bear anytime.
Well, as Irvine does anyway, right?
As they do anytime.
Liz, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
Next up tonight is a look at what you may be driving in the not-too-distant future. From UC Berkeley, here's Roxanne McCosden.
It seems hardly a day goes by without yet another story about the high cost of gasoline or about the damage being done to the environment by automobiles. Well, UC Berkeley is trying to help society move beyond our dependence on oil. Here at the Institute of Transportation Studies, researchers have just gotten their hands on a new test vehicle. I'm here with Tim Lipman. He's the co-manager of the research project. Tim, what is this car?
Well, this is an electric vehicle that runs on hydrogen. So it uses a device called a fuel cell to produce electricity from hydrogen gas, and that electricity then drives an electric motor.
The name of the car is the F-Cell. Lipman and his colleagues have just received it from its manufacturer, Daimler-Chrysler.
You drive many miles, you have fun driving these miles, because every mile you drive, you collect data for us.
The research team will have the car for the next 2 years, getting drivers' reactions to the car and seeing how it holds up under real-world conditions.
I really do feel like a kid on Christmas morning here because I've been studying these fuel cell vehicles for about 12 years now, and I really am amazed at the technical progress that Daimler-Chrysler and some other companies have made over that period.
The F-Cell has been in the works for more than 10 years and is considered the cutting edge of automotive technology. Daimler-Chrysler and its partner Ballard, which makes the fuel cell, have produced several versions of the car over the years. The breakthrough for this generation of the car came when engineers figured out how to put the fuel cell in the floor, making the look and feel of the car closer to conventional gas vehicles.
Okay, so here's the key. Okay. So go ahead and put it in. It starts up pretty much like a regular car, but you'll see it's a little different. Go ahead and push it in. Now turn it on. Now push a little further, and now let go. And you can see the car is now going through its startup routine. You'll see it says 30% ready. It'll go to 60%, and then to 90%. And then the little max power needle will start to come up. And when that reaches the green zone, it's just doing now it's saying it's okay to start. So now we can go ahead and put it into drive.
This part is all the same?
Yeah, just like regular car. And forward we go.
Hydrogen fuel can be produced from a variety of sources, one of the cleanest being wind power. While there are still questions about the environmental effects of producing large amounts of hydrogen, Lippmann says the technology holds much potential.
If you really want to find a fuel that will dramatically cut carbon emissions in the long term, and that can also be produced domestically, and that also addresses air pollution, I really don't think there's a better option than hydrogen at this point. Now again, there are some key technical and economic hurdles, but there's no more promising alternative out there than this hydrogen technology.
And Lippmann says the fuel cell cars are at least as safe as gasoline-powered cars. But before these cars can hit the road in large numbers, car makers must find ways to get them to travel more miles before refueling. The hydrogen takes up a lot of space, only allowing the F-cell to drive about 100 miles before it needs a fill-up. It'll also be about 10 years before there will be enough fueling stations to make it practical for people to buy the cars. Although they'll have fewer maintenance costs, the fuel cells are still more expensive to make than gasoline engines, and they don't stand up to freezing temperatures like conventional cars. But Daimler-Chrysler says those problems will be solved, and that their investment in the car will be worth it.
One thing is introducing a clean technology into the market. The other thing is ensuring Daimler-Chrysler's future, because this will be the future, and maybe within the next 20-30 years there'll be no more combustion engine being produced, so we have to get ready not to miss the promising technology.
Daimler-Chrysler has built 60 F-cell prototypes which are being tested around the world. The company placed about half of those vehicles in testing locations in California because California is a leader in requiring cleaner running cars.
The goal is to try to get these cars into the hands of the public by the year 2015, and they'll be the cleanest cars ever produced. In fact, all that comes out of the tailpipe is steam and a little water. I'm Roxanne Makashjan in Berkeley. Cheers.
Some of you movie buffs may recognize this building. This is where key scenes in the 1973 sequel to Planet of the Apes were filmed. In the movie, this was the government compound that stored apes in the basement. But in reality, it's the Social Science Tower here at UC Irvine, one of the many buildings that cater to the 24,000 students, 1,400 faculty, and 3 Nobel laureates based here. And we've got some Hollywood in our next story too. Well, at least the filmmaking part of it. What you are about to see is the behind-the-scenes look at the making of When Things Get Small, and I mean really, really tiny. It's a wildly irreverent film produced by a group at UC San Diego who are absolutely determined to put the fun in nanoscience.
Action. That's a lot of atoms. How many? Let's see. It's something small. What the? Oh well. One, over here. Thanks.
The subject of the program is nanoscience in a very broad sense. We're using research that Ivan Schuler, who's a professor in the physics department here, and his colleagues here on campus do to get into the world of nanoscience.
So nanoscience is studying what happens when you make things small. And that's basically it. What happens when you make them really small? Like 1/billionth of something that you can see.
It's sort of a combination of a science show and one of the sort of popular cooking shows that you see on right now, where it's taking a subject and it's making it really accessible for the audience, but also fun.
We're trying to give people analogies and skits, things that you can grasp onto that are in our experience, that we can then relate to, so that we can get some idea of this very counterintuitive and almost actually completely imperceptible world.
It's not magic. It really happens.
The ever-popular nanoscale.
That 1/billionth, really, right with your eyes, right at us.
Okay.
You kind of glance over something. You're really driving it home.
It's actually easier with the camera, not you, but I'll keep going.
I know, it's really hard to look at.
In the jargon of science, we're talking about the scale of nanometers.
Or 1/billionth of a meter. The ever-popular nanoscale.
You hear it all the time these days. Nano this, nano that, but what does that all mean? Well, let's see. How can I explain? Oh, hey, Ivan.
Here, I'll help you.
Ow.
I'm having a great time. One of the best things about doing this project is being able to work with Ivan and Adam. Working with Ivan is he's always keeps you on your toes in a number of ways. He's keeping you thinking right, or thinking correctly about a problem. And Adam just brings in so many great ideas.
Just one more sentence.
Or you could end it on a question too.
And I just have absolute, complete confidence in Adam and Ivan's ability to pull something off here, something interesting and something entertaining.
They can make holes in it with an electron ray gun. No kidding. The electron ray literally changes the...
It's almost like a Laurel and Hardy show we've got, the two of us playing off each other, which, I think will naturally be fun.
The idea of bringing the project to Petro Park was based on trying to give an idea about the scale of things. Okay, so the idea was to see if we can compare things to big things and to small things to give a sense of what we're talking about. Okay?
If each atom were, say, the size of this peanut here, that would be enough peanuts to completely fill this ballpark. Now that is one heck of a bowl of peanuts.
If people can walk away feeling amazed, feeling a sense of wonder about what nanoscience is attempting to do, or if they even just come away knowing that nano means a billionth of a meter, then I think we've gone a long way in doing our job.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us here at UC Irvine. State of Minds will return in the spring, where we will report from the University of California, Santa Cruz. We're going to the beach. Until then, I'm George Strait. Good night.